The first casualty of a system is the individual. Noam Chomsky. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. You've always felt it. That strange emptiness behind your achievements. You do everything right. You follow the rules, meet the deadlines, answer the calls, smile when needed, stay polite, stay useful. But somewhere beneath it all, something keeps whispering that this isn't your real life. You're not failing, you're not broken, but you are tired. Not in a way sleep can fix, not burnout. It's a deeper kind of exhaustion. The kind that comes from living a life that doesn't feel like yours. Like your soul has been suffocating in silence, screaming behind a mask you didn't even choose. And the worst part is, you've learned to pretend that it's normal. From the moment you were born, the system started shaping you. Before you could speak or think, you were given documents, a certificate, an identification number, registration codes. You didn't get to enter this world as a human being. You were processed as a data point, not a name, not a person, just another entry in a system built to track, control, and define. That number isn't just for records. It's how you're accessed, judged, taxed, punished, approved, denied. Every time you go to the hospital, apply for a job, open a bank account, vote, pay a fine, the system isn't dealing with you as a person. It sees your code, your profile, your category. You don't interact with life. You interact with interfaces. And slowly, it teaches you something dangerous, that your value depends on how well you perform, how productive you are, how closely you match expectations. Your dreams, your pain, your uniqueness, none of that fits the form. The world isn't built to meet the human in you. It's built to measure, compare, manage. You are not seen as alive. You are seen as functional. So you adjust, you shrink, you try to become more efficient, more predictable, more acceptable. And when it still feels empty, you blame yourself. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I need to fix something. Maybe it's just me. But it's not you. It's the structure. The system wasn't made to honor you. It was made to use you. This isn't about some conspiracy. It's about how deeply we've accepted this as normal. How easily we confuse survival with life. The deeper truth is, you were never meant to be a number. You were never meant to be managed. You were born free. Before they gave you a name, a file, a legal status, you existed. That was enough. And if it hurts to hear this, that's good. It means something inside you is still alive, still remembering. This pain you carry isn't dysfunction. It's a signal, a quiet, persistent reminder that you are more than what the system sees, more than what you've been trained to be. You are not a code. You are not a result. You are not a product. You are a human being. And that right there is the beginning of real freedom. They never asked who you are. They only asked what you are, what you do, what you earn, where you live, how you behave. From the very beginning, the system didn't care about your essence. It cared about classifying you, creating a profile, assigning a function. That's why the first thing they gave you wasn't love or freedom. It was documentation. Proof not of your humanity, but of your existence in their framework. Without it, they say you don't exist. But that's the lie. You exist, just not in their control grid. And that terrifies them. The moment you're documented, you're taxable, finable, trackable, punishable. You become an object with an address, a signature, a record. Not a person, a subject, a part of their machinery. And every single interaction you have within the system reinforces this. You want healthcare? Give your number. You want to work? fill out forms, you want to travel, show your papers. Everything that should be a human experience becomes a transaction, a permission, a checkmark, and you've been trained to see this as normal. The elite don't see people, they see categories. They don't make decisions based on empathy. They operate through metrics, populations, sectors, compliance rates. You're not John or Anna or Amir. You're Unit 348721. And the more predictable you are, the more easily they can manage you. That's why emotions are suppressed. Spontaneity is dangerous. Questioning is punished. From school to the workplace, obedience is disguised as professionalism. Independence is labeled problematic. You're taught to fit in, not to wake up. And here's the dark twist. If you ever step outside the system, they say you're nobody. No documents, no bank account, no permanent residence. Then legally, you don't count. But in truth, that's when you become real again. Because once you're out of their tracking range, they lose control. You're no longer a number. You're a presence. A human that can't be priced, rated, or predicted. That's freedom. And they fear it. Not because it's violent, but because it's uncontrollable. This doesn't mean rejecting everything. It means seeing clearly, using the system as a tool, not letting it define you. That's the shift. When your passport is just a means to move, not your identity. When your bank account is a utility, not a measurement of worth. When your job is a function, not your life. You stop existing for the system and start existing within it, on your terms. But that requires something hard, deprogramming, not just mentally, but emotionally. Because the system didn't just teach you rules, it taught you fear. Fear of disconnection, fear of poverty, fear of being left out, left behind, erased. It conditioned you to equate control with safety. And that's the prison, not made of walls, but of beliefs, invisible, but stronger than steel. And unless you see it, you stay trapped. To break this, you don't need to run away. You need to reclaim, to remember what it feels like to act, not react, to choose, not obey, to move because you want to, not because someone told you to. That's not rebellion. That's remembering. You're not a digital file. You're not a walking transaction. You're not a cog in their plan. You're a conscious, feeling, free human being. And nothing scares them more than that. No one told you this directly, but you were programmed long before you had a choice. It started in childhood, not with abuse or trauma necessarily, but with something even more subtle. Expectations, labels, pressure to behave. From an early age, you were trained to perform, to be acceptable, to adapt. Not because you were wrong, but because the system needed you to be manageable. School wasn't built to awaken your mind. It was built to standardize you. Sit still, follow the schedule, memorize, obey. You weren't asked what you felt. You were told what to think. Every test, every grade, every rule reinforced one thing. Don't question, just deliver. That wasn't education. That was programming. Even in your home, love was often conditional. Be a good boy. Don't talk back. Don't embarrass us. These weren't signs of care. They were signs of control. Slowly, you learned that approval came at the cost of authenticity, that being yourself was risky. So you adapted. You shut parts of yourself down, the messy, wild, emotional parts. You buried your anger, hid your sadness, numbed your confusion. You learned to smile when you didn't feel like it. You became exactly what they needed, not for your growth, but for their comfort. That's how the system keeps going. Not through force, but through quiet obedience, passed from one generation to the next. And it didn't stop there. As you grew, culture picked up where family left off. Media told you what success looks like, what beauty means, what being normal is. And if you didn't match it, you felt shame. Not because you were wrong, but because the image was fake. You were never meant to fit into a mold, but fitting in became survival. You traded authenticity for acceptance, and the price was yourself. Here's where it gets deeper. The system doesn't just want your time or energy. It wants your mind, your inner world. It wants to shape your thoughts before you even speak them. That's why distraction is everywhere. That's why silence feels so uncomfortable now. Because silence gives space for truth. And truth is dangerous to control. When you're alone and quiet, you start to feel again. You start to question. And that's when the programming starts to crack. Your unconscious has been trained to sabotage your own freedom. That's the tragedy. Every time you start to choose differently, something pulls you back. Fear, guilt, doubt. You were taught to betray yourself before anyone else does. That's why people stay stuck in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, identities that feel like costumes. It's not because they're weak, it's because the conditioning runs deep. It's not in the surface thoughts, it's in the nervous system, the muscles, the breath. That's where the system hides, inside your own reactions. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start noticing the scripts you were handed, the behaviors that aren't yours, the beliefs that feel foreign when you really sit with them. That's the beginning of real work. Not change for approval, but change for truth. Not to become better, but to become real. And for that, you don't need to add more. You need to start removing. Not learning who you are, remembering who you were before the system told you otherwise. That's how the deprogramming begins. Quietly, honestly, and completely on your terms. There's something most people never realize. The system only recognizes you if you carry its symbols, documents, numbers, records, signatures. If you don't have them, the system says you don't exist. You're invisible. You can't get a job, open a bank account, travel, rent a place, vote, or even receive medical help in some places. And yet, in that invisibility, something paradoxical happens. You become free, not because you disappear as a human being, but because the system no longer knows how to categorize or control you. You're not a subject, you're just a person. And that, in the world we live in, is revolutionary. The system needs structure. It needs registration, identification, verification, because without that, it can't control, can't tax, can't punish. So from the start, your life is linked to things you didn't choose. Your name was given, your status was assigned, your location was recorded, and all of it was packaged into a digital profile that has followed you your entire life. You weren't asked if you wanted to be part of this system. You were born into it. And now, you're told that stepping outside of it is dangerous, even insane. But the danger they talk about isn't to you, it's to their control. Think about it. If you didn't use their money, didn't depend on their banks, didn't require their jobs, didn't need their health care, who would own you? Who could force you into anything? The truth is, people without documents still breathe, still think, still feel, still live. But they can't be measured, so the system erases them. It declares them non-existent, not because they're gone, but because they can't be managed. That's what real freedom threatens: predictability. That's why it's not encouraged. That's why it's punished. Because a free human being doesn't follow the algorithm. And without the algorithm, the system loses power. This doesn't mean you need to throw away your documents or disappear. That's not the point. The point is, to stop identifying with the labels you've been given. Your passport isn't yourself. Your ID doesn't define your worth. Your job title isn't your identity. These things are useful, but they are not you. The problem isn't the tools. The problem is when you forget that you're the one using them, not the other way around. A card in your pocket is just plastic. It becomes power only when you let it represent your existence. Once you see this clearly, you begin to change your relationship with the system. You stop chasing validation through it. You stop trying to prove yourself. You use what's useful, and you discard what's not. You learn how to move through the world like a free person who simply navigates the structure, not someone trapped inside it. You can travel with a passport and still remember you're not defined by borders. You can pay with a bank card and still know your value can't be measured in currency. You can play the game without believing it's real. That's the shift. This is about remembering that you were alive before they gave you a name, that you existed before the system taught you how to behave, and that no matter how many numbers they attach to your existence, you are not a number, you are a being. And the more deeply you realize that, the less power the system has over you. Not because you fight it, but because you no longer need it to feel real. You can't escape the system by physically running from it. That's an illusion. The real trap isn't on the outside. It's in the way you think, feel, and respond. It's the voice in your head that says, you have to do this. It's the guilt that pulls you back when you try something different. It's the fear that rises the moment you question authority. That voice wasn't born with you. It was installed, and it lives in the nervous system, in the body, in every conditioned reaction you carry. This is why the system doesn't need chains. It just needs you to believe. If you believe you must obey to survive, then you'll control yourself better than any external force ever could. That's how control became invisible. And the truth is, most of your suffering doesn't come from laws or rules. It comes from the way you were trained to see yourself. You don't think you're allowed to rest unless you earn it. You don't feel valuable unless someone approves. You don't trust your own instincts unless they match the script. That's not by accident. It's a result of years of programming. Schools taught you to seek permission. Work taught you to be replaceable. Culture taught you to chase status. Even relationships were infected. You perform roles instead of being seen. And after all of that, you wonder why life feels hollow. This system doesn't care if you're happy. It only cares if you function. If you keep showing up, keep producing, keep consuming. And when you burn out, it doesn't pause. It replaces you. That's why trying harder doesn't work. That's why being a good citizen or a high performer leaves you feeling used. Because deep down, you weren't built for this. You weren't made to be a product. You were made to be present, alive, human. But no one taught you how to live like that. They only taught you how to survive. That's where the shift begins. Not with rebellion, not with rejection, but with reclaiming. Reclaiming your time, your energy, your attention. You start by noticing how often you act out of fear of being judged, excluded, penalized, and then you ask the harder question, what if I stop? What if I stop chasing approval, stop explaining myself, stop performing? At first, it feels like death, because the false self starts to fall apart. But beneath that collapse, something real waits, something that doesn't need validation, something that's been silent for years. This is the part the system can't touch. Your awareness, your truth, your choice. You can go to work and still be free. You can pay taxes and still know who you are. The key is remembering that every system is temporary, but your inner authority isn't. When you shift from obedience to clarity, everything changes. You stop living by default and start moving with intention. You no longer ask, "What should I do?" You ask, "What feels true now?" And from that question, your life starts to belong to you again. Not to the system, not to the role, but to the part of you that's never been a number. The moment you realize you can use the system without belonging to it, everything shifts. Most people believe they either have to fully submit or fully escape, but both are traps. You don't need to disappear into the forest or renounce everything. What you need is clarity. Clarity that the system is just a structure, not a source of identity. You can hold a passport and know you're not a citizen of any illusion. You can use a bank account and know your worth has nothing to do with numbers. You can interact with the world without believing its labels define you. That's not rebellion. That's sovereignty. The key is detachment. When you stop identifying with the roles, the forms, the expectations, you regain power. That doesn't mean you never follow rules. It means you choose when, how, and why. Most people live on autopilot, reacting, complying, adapting. They don't ask if what they're doing actually aligns with who they are. They do it because they're supposed to, because everyone else is doing it, because the fear of exclusion is stronger than the desire for truth. But the moment you pause and ask, "Is this mine?" you start to wake up. And that's when you begin to use the system like a tool, like a temporary costume you wear to get through a certain space without ever confusing it with your skin. You learn how to speak their language without losing your own. You fill out forms when needed, but you don't let them shape how you see yourself. You show up in required roles, but inside, you're not attached. You become flexible, not because you're weak, but because you're free. That flexibility is dangerous to a system built on rigidity, but this kind of inner freedom requires practice. It's not enough to think differently. You have to feel differently. That's why embodiment matters. Your body still holds old fears. Your breath still tightens under pressure. Your nervous system still reacts to authority as if your life depends on it. So you work with that. You slow down. You notice your triggers. You learn to respond instead of react. And slowly, the inner weight starts to lift. You stop fighting yourself. You stop apologizing for existing. You start moving from a place of grounded choice. Practical steps matter. Turn off noise more often. Limit your exposure to media that sells you fear. Spend time in silence, even 5 minutes a day. Write down what feels true before the world tells you who to be. Start saying no without explanation. Let discomfort be a sign of growth, not danger. Use your documents, cards, and devices consciously. Ask yourself, am I using this, or is it using me? That question alone can shift how you live. Freedom doesn't mean having no structure. It means remembering you're the one choosing which structures to engage with and why. That awareness turns you from a passive consumer into an active participant, from a managed unit into a conscious human being. And once that clicks, there's no going back. You still walk in the world, but the weight of it no longer sits on your shoulders. You carry yourself. You guide yourself. And the system, it becomes just another layer, no longer the center. You don't have to destroy the system to be free. You just need to stop depending on it. That's the shift. Use what works. Ignore what traps you. Your passport, your bank card, your accounts, they're tools, not your identity. Some people use companies to protect their assets, but don't tie their self-worth to money. Others build businesses in other countries, not for status, but for freedom. People like Elon Musk or Robert Kiyosaki don't serve the system. They use it. They learned how to play on it, not inside it. You can still live in the modern world and be free. Real security doesn't come from structures. It comes from inner clarity. People all over the world are living through trusts, crypto, offshore strategies, mobile income, and legal awareness, not to hide, but to stay sovereign. What they all have in common is this: they no longer believe the system gives them value. And that shift changes everything. Start small, think consciously, use the system when it benefits you, but don't let it own you. Say no more often. Trust your inner compass more than social pressure. Join circles of people who've already stepped out of blind obedience. Learn to live with less fear, more intention. Your freedom begins the moment you stop letting them define who you are. If these words resonate, subscribe to the channel. This message matters. If you feel like something inside you woke up, join the Telegram. Some things we say only there. And if you recognize yourself in this video, leave a comment. Right? I no longer run from the system. If you're done playing their game, right? My freedom begins within. If you're ready to live on your terms, right? I reclaim my power. If this video gave you clarity, let's see how many of us are truly awake. Let's build a space for those who are ready. This is just the beginning.